Because when we do that, what tends to happen is that these things get stuck in our body. They get stuck in our body energetically. And then a couple of years later, it comes out in, really interesting ways that we don't want it to manifest.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Sunny from the Brightest Rainbow Ever. I'm very happy to have you. And if you're new, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here. And if you haven't yet subscribed, definitely come subscribe. We have weekly videos every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Why I chose on that note, not just because I'm gay, I mean, yeah, obviously that too, but it was also from the quote, "From the greatest storm comes a very bright rainbow." So that quote really resonated with me. I'm claiming the brightest rainbow ever.
Today is a very special day. I have a very special guest with me, my very first guest on the Brightest Rainbow Ever, our very own Kelly Dawn. She's a badass business boss lady, and I'm so happy to have her here. So thank you for being here, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk with you.
So what started your entrepreneur journey? What led you on this path?
So my first business started back in 2013, and I opened up my own residential housekeeping business. And I got into that because previously I was a building superintendent, and part of that job involved cleaning. And I'm one of those weirdos who I've always loved cleaning. Like, it's like therapy for me. It's like a meditation for me, and I love it. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the job, but there are a lot of things about being a building manager that I didn't love. And I decided to just make the jump and start my own business. And from there, I was hooked. I thought, I'm never, ever, ever going back to working for other people, because the freedom that came along with it was just something that I had never experienced before. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs, but it was never anything that I thought I'd be doing.
Cool.
Yeah. And so from there, like, once I started that business, I really got into personal development. I got back into my spiritual practice, and I just became obsessed with this whole concept that we get to create the life that we desire. And that's what moved me into coaching a couple of years later.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's exciting. And once you get the hit to follow your heart in your own business, like, there's no going back, right? It's like, once you cross that threshold, that's it. It's too late. So what would you like people to know about you?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I feel like the main thing I always want to share with people, and I feel like I say it all the time, but it also can't be said enough, is that this whole reality that we're experiencing comes from within. And for anyone listening, if you're ever feeling stuck, if you're ever feeling frustrated, if you ever find yourself in a position that you don't want to be in, change can happen in such a short amount of time, because it comes from the way we think, the way our vibe is, what's going on with us energetically, and of course the actions that we take from that place. But it's one decision that changes the trajectory of our entire life. And that can happen so, so quickly.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because, like, we have this belief that change takes time, right? I mean, sometimes, like, maybe the reinforcement of that change takes time, like setting that boundary with yourself, but change can happen in an instant, and most people don't know that or have that awareness around change, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And I totally get that sometimes, like, we get into our own patterns, and we have our own belief systems that feel very deeply rooted, and that can feel challenging to change sometimes. But I always love the example of going from, like, a smoker to a non-smoker, because that's something I experienced years ago. And that's one of those things, like, your life changes in an instant the moment you put out that last cigarette. Right from that moment forward, you're a completely different person when it comes to how you're taking care of your health. And I just love that, because that's such, like, a tangible thing that I think a lot of us can relate to, where, well, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be really hard. There's going to be a lot of sacrifice involved. And all of that is really a choice.
Yeah, that's true. And, like, that's such a good example to turn to, because a lot of people can relate to that. And I know you've had a really deep, rich spiritual practice, and you and I, on that note, like, what I love about our values and stuff, we call our, like, love and light with a kick, as you would say, because we don't entirely vibe with the purely love and light crowd. Would you like to talk on that and like your twist, your awesome badass twist on this, and why I feel like you're literally perfect for just being a guest here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the spiritual coaching space for a few years, and I love everyone doing their own thing. I'm all for people expressing themselves however they want to express themselves. And if that's from a purely love and light standpoint where they don't look at anything that isn't in that arena, that's totally cool. But for me, I feel so much of the transformational work comes from looking at our own shit. And sorry, can we swear on here? I forgot to ask.
Oh, girl, yes.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
I swear on here all the time.
Okay. And I just feel like there's some teachings out there that aren't really helpful for people, especially people who've been through trauma or people who have a lot of things to work through. This
Yep.
idea that if we look at anything that we label as negative, that means that we're going to attract more bad things into our life, I think is ridiculous, because if we don't address the things that need healing, how the fuck are we going to heal? And a lot of what's taught, and again, I'm generalizing here, is this whole idea of like focus on the positive, focus only on the good high vibe things. Otherwise, you're going to attract a bunch of bad things. But at the end of the day, like I've done that. I tried that route. It does not work for me whatsoever.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm definitely all for choosing how you want to be in the world, choosing how you want to feel. I'm all for feeling loving. I'm all for feeling like high vibe, abundant, joyful, happy. But at the same time, if you're moving through a space, whether you're having a bad day, you just went through like a bad breakup or a really shitty thing happened in your life, like feel what you need to feel. Don't sweep that under the carpet. Don't stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and pretend like, oh, everything's fine. Because when we do that, what tends to happen is that these things get stuck in our body. They get stuck in our body energetically. And then a couple of years later, it comes out in, really interesting ways that we don't want it to manifest. So when we just process what we need to process, feel what we need to feel, work through the discomfort. And I think that's the biggest thing, because we don't want to be uncomfortable, especially, and I'm going to age myself here, but it seems with the kids these days that this whole idea of doing anything uncomfortable or feeling bad in any way is something they want to avoid. And it's just not healthy. Like, we need to dive into the stuff that doesn't feel good, because that's part of being human. And we're all strong enough to do that. And when we can sit with the discomfort, when we can sit with our own shit and look at it and transform what we need to transform, that's where growth comes from. It doesn't come from reciting positive affirmations all day and not looking at our shadow or not looking at the things that we actually need to shift.
I'm so glad you shared this, because I think that's what's driven me nuts about the spiritual community, and where I found, like, to your point, a lot of us have traumas or have dealt with difficult, painful breakups, and it's not like we can just be in our vortex all day and just be like, oh, I mean, I know my brand is about being the brightest rainbow ever, but like, the rainbow comes from a storm, right? It's not like it just operates out of thin air. It needs like a certain environment that's conducive to it. And I think that's the part where most spiritual people forget. They just focus on the rainbow part and not the storm that led to the rainbow. And I think you and I, what I love about you is that you honor the storm. You give permission to the storm to be felt and understood and heard and processed, and not just like, oh, love and light it away. And like, it's not that simple. And yeah, there's so much victim blaming in like the spiritual community, like a lot of like blame and shame, like just to feel our feelings and feel human. I don't know if you felt this, Kelly, but for me, it felt in a way dehumanizing of my own humanity to not even let me feel my negative feelings, because it was very confusing. I found it to create like a cognitive dissonance of sorts. Like, okay, if I have these negative feelings, why do I have them if I'm not meant to feel them? I started to question things. I started to question a lot of the teachings, because it's like, okay, then why do I have these feelings if I'm not meant to feel them and experience them and just like process them out? Like, it was just so confusing. Was that was that also part of your process too, that made you like have that shift?
Yeah, because a lot of what I was reading and learning was this idea that we're light beings that came to the planet, but there is so much emphasis on being the light and
Yeah.
ascending our physical form. And I was just like,
Mhm.
what's wrong with being human? Like, we're here for a reason. We're on this planet in our little meat suits to experience everything, even the things that feel really ugly and crunchy and nasty that we don't really want to be in. That's all part of the game. That's all part of the reason why we came here. And like you said, like these negative feelings, it's feedback. Like if you're in a relationship with someone and you're feeling like a piece of shit all the time, that's feedback that maybe it's not the right fit for you.
Yeah. And no affirmations, and like this is where it can get, where these law of attraction teachings can get dangerous, I find, especially if you're in a toxic relationship, like you're alluding, like focusing on all the grateful stuff that you have about this partner is not healthy if they're toxic and narcissistic and like you need to leave, like all the like gratitude in the world won't save you out of this relationship and who the person is. So yes, like you said, spot on. I think like you hit something really important. Like it's feedback, and it's not something to be afraid of or run away from. It's something to lean into. Like you and I value, we value leaning into the feeling and not running away. I think there's like this next level. I don't know. Do you notice like in the spiritual community, especially with the love and light, like this fragility around just going to the dark places and like experiencing the discomfort? Like we can get even deeper, like on bigger topics like racism and like injustices, like this need for avoidance instead of getting real with our feelings and honoring them.
Yeah, I feel there's this idea that anything dark is bad needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with looking at those aspects of ourselves that we might not want other people to know about. There's nothing wrong with exploring different parts of ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're going to take action on them. It means that there's something there within us that's drawn to that, that's giving that energy. And when we have awareness around it, then we can decide what to do with it. And that's when we can heal things. That's like, we can't heal what we're afraid to look at. And what we're afraid to look at is often the stuff that we shove into the corner, into the darkness.
That's on point. And like on that note, like in our perception of darkness as a bad thing, that's also just a perception. And I know you have an interesting journey on that because like you know very well like people's perception on certain beliefs and attitudes on certain things that we've had misconceptions on. Would you like to talk on that?
Oh, I'd love to. One of my favorite topics.
I figured.
So to give the audience a little background, I practice witchcraft, and during that started back around the age of 14 or so. But then during my 20s and even into my early 30s, I really bounced back and forth between witchcraft and Christianity because I was just really drawn to both. And I really had a lot of work to do to come to terms with the fact that I get to believe whatever I want to believe. And so I identify as a witch, and I have for quite a while now. But I'm also very open-minded, and I just believe that whatever we're drawn to, we can pull from and take on what we need, regardless of the tradition. So within my practice as a witch, I'm always listening to podcasts, I'm reading different books, and just like exploring what other people are into because I just find it really, really interesting. And along that journey, I came across demonolatry and Luciferianism. And at the time when I first started hearing about these topics, even though I was a practicing witch and consider myself to be fairly open-minded, I still had a lot of that ingrained religious fear around these things. And I thought that they were evil. I thought they were things that we shouldn't touch. We shouldn't go there. And when I came up against that fear, I sat with it for a little bit. And I asked myself, like, where did I learn that this was bad? And I traced it back,
Mm.
and sure enough, it came from church and religion, right? So I put my foot in the door and I pried it open and I started exploring things. And what I ended up finding is that demons are they're not these scary monsters that we're told. They are ancient gods and goddesses. They're these
Oh,
energies that,
interesting.
yeah, I find them to be these energies that my understanding of them is that they're ancient energies that have been here long before humankind has. And I'm not saying there aren't energies out there, spirits, entities that are not out for humanity's best interest. I do believe in like negative spirits, things that are
Yeah.
out here to not really work with us, but rather against us. But demons in general are not evil. They're just spirits, the same as angels, fairies, these other entities, and all these
Yeah.
different types of spirits. So I really got into working with demons, and what I found them to be is very helpful when it comes to my own spiritual growth, my own path. Also very, very easy to work with, and that drew me to Luciferianism, which again brought on all these fears, all these stories came up.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and I've been walking this particular path, which is, I'm not huge on labels, but it's known as the left-hand path when it comes to witchcraft generally, since about 2016. And I was very afraid to speak openly about it at first because of the misconceptions. I was afraid that people in the coaching industry would think I was off my rocker, that I was like this evil person. And I had a lot of reservations around sharing my path openly. And then I was teaching on witchcraft. I was talking about it with my clients in my programs, but I wasn't talking about what I was doing in my own practice very much. And one day I just said, fuck it. And I started talking about what I was doing in my own life, in my own practice. And that just opened up this floodgate, I felt, where even more people who were like my people, who were like, they got it, they wanted to be in my world, they came in. A lot of people left, which is totally cool, but it was like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulder, because in the coaching industry, the spiritual coaching industry, there's a big emphasis on being high vibe, focusing on the love and light. And it's cool if you're a witch, as long as you're a good witch or a white witch, which I am not a fan of that term whatsoever. And I just started coming out and talking about working with Lucifer, working with Satan, working with demons, sharing pictures of my altar. And the people who get it, they get it, and they're open, even if it's not really their thing. And the people who are turned off, they go, and that's totally cool. But I just find when we're open about what we do, especially when we have a business, it's just so liberating. It's going to call the right people into your world, and it just allows you to be more fully expressed, which I think is one of the main reasons why a lot of us started a business to begin with.
Exactly. Like, we started our businesses to set ourselves free, like in every way, including our expression and who we are and our most authentic truths, and not like another form of entrapment and confinement, right? Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's like the same Christianity and Bible that teaches us to fear women, and that women are bad and evil, and that we created the first sin, right? So it's like, of course, anything that's empowering and strong, they taught us to fear it, right? And so yeah, it's quite funny how particular the coaching industry is. Like, it's quite interesting. Let's just leave it at that. I just wish, like, we preach open-mindedness, yet we don't entirely embody it fully. And so I find I find that to be a full challenge. I mean, like, for me, like, coming out in my business, like, as a queer person, like, that's a form of self-expression that is, so risky, but something that was important to me, just like it was important to you to come out as a witch and a Luciferian witch, and like be real and authentic about your practices, and like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna like start sharing. People who vibe with it will vibe with it, people who don't won't. Because like, we're so stuck in our ways, like we were saying at the beginning, like we're so stuck in our ways, feeling like we can't change, or change is hard, or we can't move past our beliefs, especially people who are proprietary about certain beliefs, right, and very rigid in their thinking. And I like that you just like bust the myths wide open about everything, like what we know to be true, and you're like, I'm just gonna do my thing and just like explore what people said was bad and wrong, like maybe, and I get to feel into it and say what feels right for me. And I like that. I really resonate with that.
Yeah, I'm all for moving towards what feels uncomfortable if you want to go in that direction, and also knowing when it's a no for you, right? Because there are some things that I look into and I'm just like, yeah, that's just not for me. That's cool. But I'm no longer afraid to look in different places. And coming from like a mainly Christian background, that was a huge thing that I had to overcome. But the main question that I always came back to is, where is this fear coming from? Where did I pick this up?
That's such a big one. Yeah, I also came from a Christian background, and I have religious trauma from like a different point of view. But if you want, we can always have you back. This is not going to be the one and only time. I'd love to have you back on the channel. I know you have so much rich insight. Because we can talk on Christianity if you want, if you feel comfortable, like the myths and busts, like Um, yeah, it's amazing how much fear mongering Christianity really instills in us, like on so many levels, on like what is true, what isn't true, on women, on queer people, like so much fear instilled in humanity from organized religion, which is why I don't vibe with organized religion either. It's been a pleasure having you on my channel. I would love to have you back if you're willing. It's been so fun. We can talk for hours. And I would love to talk for hours on this with you. So thank you so much for being generous with your time and being willing to come on my channel, being my first guest on the Brightest Rainbow Ever. Do you have any closing thoughts or parting words that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Nothing's coming through at the moment. I'll say as soon as we like stop the recording, it'll be like this channeled thing coming through. But no, thank you
By
so
the
much for having
way,
me.
yeah, absolutely. And we're happy to have you. You're welcome to come back anytime. And definitely stay safe and cozy. Be sure to subscribe, share this video with your friends to challenge their beliefs and open their hearts and minds. And give this video a like. And we launch videos every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So definitely be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next week. And stay safe and cozy, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Where it won't be this like desperate or confused or fear-based energy. You'll feel more sure of yourself and your connection with the angels and archangels.